Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My guest is Martin Keating, whose new book is The Final Jihad. Martin, thank you for coming.
Teresa, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Now, first of all, let's get this out of the way. You're an attorney who's turned to writing. There's so many attorneys who've turned to writing. What is it? Is there a connection between writing and the legal system?
Well, of course, we write a lot as lawyers, and I think that that's when we develop the feeling that we can write more than we're doing, and we can enjoy aspects of life that we probably couldn't in the legal profession. And we meet a lot of different types of people also, and that's what happened to me. I was involved in putting together a lot of different projects for people. I was involved in corporate law, and I thought I could do more than this business stuff. So I have always wanted to write a novel, and I finally did. The Final Jihad.
Explain that title to us, because I understand there's been some controversy even about the title itself of the book.
Yes, the Final Jihad. Jihad means a religious holy war or a struggle to the death, unending struggle to the death. There are a number of Arab groups that don't like my use of the term jihad because it's an Arabic word and they relate it to the religious side. The situation in truth is that we have taken that word into the English language, just like we have the word Aladdin and the word all the A to Z, Aladdin to zero. And it's become part of our vocabulary. They wanted me to change the title to The Final Struggle, but it doesn't have quite the same sense that I wanted to get across to the readers.
In fact, there was some heavy-duty pressure. I think a news network wanted you to change, because of the advertising, wanted you to change it to The Final Struggle. And
yes.
How do you resist that kind of pressure, Martin?
We just had to say no. There was an actual threat, a number of threats against me personally, and then I received a lot of pressure from some Arab groups in Washington demanding final editorial say, and then even threatening to enjoin the publication of the book. So,
but that's not happened.
It's not happened. So the book is out.
Tell us a little bit about the premise of this book.
Well, this book is what the FBI truly fears. This is the book that was finished in 1991 that predicted a number of things that have happened since then. It's the coming to America of foreign terrorists establishing a base in America, which fortunately hasn't happened yet. And from that base, then the terrorists can carry out acts of violence across the country to undermine the country. When the Soviet Union imploded, $9 billion in Soviet gold disappeared from Soviet coffers in Switzerland. The KGB controlled the wealth and the weapons of the Soviet Union, and where that money went and in whose hands it might be today is very worrisome. There are a number of people, in addition to the hardliners, former hardliners in the Soviet Union, who hate us. And those people are available, and there are people being trained in Pakistan as we speak. They're called jihadis. They're being sent west to do damage to the West, presumably America mostly. And I thought it was time for the American people to know what is known by our government about some of these activities.
Martin, I understand you originally wanted to do this book as nonfiction. Why did you change it to a novel?
I probably couldn't have said things the way I can say them in a novel. I have a number of sources here and abroad who gave me information and whose lives may well be in danger for having done that. And it was better for me then to wrap a fictional story around actual events as I had learned might indeed be on our horizon. So it makes it a little bit more interesting, and it diffuses a little bit of the criticism that I might be getting from some of my sources if I were to reveal.
Now, how long ago did you start this book?
1988.
1988. Now, tell us about some of these amazing parallels. They've been reported on CNN and then again on Headline News to the Oklahoma City bombing and then the World Trade Center. First, the Oklahoma City bombing.
Well, I had about, a dozen or so events that I wrote in 1988 that came true afterwards. And the Oklahoma City bombing was one of them. I did not have the bomb site as Oklahoma City. I had it as Chicago. But when Oklahoma City happened, it was as much a shock to me as it was to everybody else. And I had a friend who had read my book and who called me and said, "My gosh, it's your book." I also had the fall of the Berlin Wall, Gorbachev's resignation, airplane that crashed into the White House, Amtrak derailment, a number of things that have happened. And that's a little bit spooky, but on the other hand, it's what I have gleaned from these intelligence sources that there are likely things such as that, and there are a lot more in the book, that the intelligence people I've contacted feel are going to happen to this country.
You know, there are some really quirky coincidences, particularly with the Oklahoma City bombing. For example, the name of the character.
Well, you mean the Tom McVeigh
Right.
character in my book versus Tim McVeigh in real life? That, of course, was totally coincidental. This book is dedicated to my Uncle Barney, and he had a very close friend whose name was Don McVeigh, and I thought to protect Don, I would change the name to Tom. And fortunately, in my book, Tom McVeigh is not a bad guy. But there is a scene in which a OHP, Oklahoma High Patrol Trooper, stops a suspicious vehicle for a flickering taillight, and he makes a discovery which he doesn't understand fully the significance of at the time, which breaks open the case. Well, of course, that happened in real life with Charlie Hanger, who stopped Tim McVeigh. And there are a number of parallels, and as a result, a number of people on the internet and on shortwave broadcasts have been saying that I was somehow involved in this, and then they attempted to.
That's got to be hard for you, Martin.
It's ridiculous, but they've implicated by their references. My brother Frank also. They've claimed that he's
governor of Oklahoma.
They claim he's in cahoots with me, and somehow it's nonsense. But these people can say what they want to say, I guess.
We mentioned also connections to or parallels to the attack on the World Trade Center. What were those parallels?
Well, it's exact parallel. I had named the World Trade Center as a probable source of a terrorist attack, or the probable locus of a terrorist attack. The reason is that the people who hate us the most are those who hate us completely, and I mean, as Americans, as opposed to the government. If you attack New York, you're attacking the American people. If you attack Washington, you're attacking the American government. So I thought a prime place to attack would be the World Trade Center. Two beautiful towers, 110 stories, filled with people, right near Wall Street, be a wonderful place to attack. And it turned out to be the case.
Martin, are you worried at all that someone might pick up this book, read it, and get ideas from the book, that it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
In a positive way, I am hopeful that that's going to happen. A negative way, which is, I'm sure you're referring to terrorists, the people who might want to carry out acts.
Right.
The truth is, the people who have bad things to do to this country, the people who can really harm the country, know what's in this book. Because a lot of the sources, a number of the sources through my uncle, are people who are related to those who are planning things. They already know this. From a positive standpoint, I hope that Americans will see that these things can happen. The FBI knows the what, usually, but they don't know the when and the where. I try to tell the whens and the wheres, in addition to the whats, because those aren't being told to Americans either. And
we should mention that you're not calling a 1-900 psychic line.
No,
that,
I am not a psychic, and I don't pretend to be.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you about the stock market.
No, please don't.
But let me ask you this. This is based on a science, actually, isn't it, called predictive analysis?
Predictive analysis is what the Pentagon calls it. They spend a lot of time and a lot of money each year trying to predict the future, in effect, and they take facts and figures, books, newspapers, magazines, articles, and employing fuzzy logic through their computers, they try to develop certain scenarios of what might really happen. And I have developed apparently an ability to do what they're doing, and I have come up with certain scenarios as a result of reading between the lines, and I took this information and found that it was virtually all verifiable and verified by various sources. So I think I'm right on target, and I think people will learn a lot. The book can be read on two levels. It can be read on the thriller level, just have a good time, or it can be read on the revelation level. I don't mean it in the religious sense, the fact revelation level, and get an idea of what indeed might be in store for America.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier, just when you and I were visiting, that fiction sometimes is stranger, or truth is stranger than fiction, and that's certainly the case with this, or the fiction is the truth.
Well, it's a surprise to a lot of people that the government knows a lot of these things, and I had FBI agents slipping notes to me when I was in Washington, and I've had a lot of contacts since then. They're concerned that the Americans aren't being told a lot of the things that they need to be told. We have a great lack of communication on security matters still in this country. Americans, for example, weren't told about the dogfights over the North Pole between Soviet and American fighter jets, with lots of our pilots killed. They didn't know about the incident in the Indian Ocean when one of our nose cones, we were testing the ICBMs, fell and it fell too close to some Soviet trawlers who'd been warned away. When the trawlers didn't move away, our destroyer moved in, and as the trawlers were attempting to extract the nose cone, our destroyer wiped out the trawlers and killed all the surviving Soviet men on the ship. We never heard about that. The State Department kept Pan Am 103 under wraps, even though they had specific threats. They knew about them. They knew about the connecting flight that was coming in, on which the bag was contained. They chose not to tell the Americans why. They told their own people, but they decided not to tell the other people, the passengers, because they didn't want to empty the airplane. Well, they did empty the airplane all over Lockerbie, Scotland, and they killed the airline as a result. These are things I think people need to know in advance and make their own decisions. And a lot of this information, virtually, well, most of it is not being shared with us.
How did you establish your contacts? Because this may surprise you. I've gone to Washington several times and have never run into any FBI agents slipping me notes. You know, I always hope that'll happen, but it never does. How does that happen?
Well, through my Uncle Barney, who was head of the Navy's version of the FBI and the Navy's version of the CIA. Over the years, he introduced me to a number of his contacts, and then when he retired, he maintained those contacts, and I, as a result, was able to have continuing access. Through my brother Frank, I was able also to meet a number of the Secret Service and FBI people. And
he was in the FBI, we should mention.
Well, Frank was, yes, a former agent, and then at the time he was number 2 or 3 at Justice, and the FBI, of course, reports to the Justice Department, is part of the Justice Department. And then when he was at Treasury, the Secret Service reports to him directly. He was head of enforcement. So through those contacts, I had doors open to me. And I even ended up in what's called the SIOC Center, which is the Strategic Information Operations Center, the inner sanctum of the J. Edgar Hoover building, almost at the Pentagon. The Pentagon is envious of what the FBI has. And that's when, in November of 1989, that I spelled out to these 12 agents in this SIOC Center conference room what I thought was going to happen to America. And what shocked me was that not one of the agents objected to anything I had to say. They all nodded and they all said, yes, indeed. It's like you've been attending our classified meetings.
Did you actually get to go through some classified files and materials?
No, but not officially. I would say that through some of the contacts I made, I received information that may have been classified. I can't verify, except that a number of the facts that I've developed for the book have never been acknowledged by the FBI, and I think, or the Secret Service, and I think that that's because they were too close to the truth. As a matter of fact, a scene I had in the book originally concerning the protection of the president, the Secret Service, through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tulsa, asked me to delete it. And it was a made-up scene. So I called my brother Frank and I said, what do you say? And he said, Martin, it's the First Amendment, you can do what you want, but if you want to keep their friendship, why don't you just delete it? So I did. So again, using predictive analysis, I thought this might be an ideal way to protect the president. Apparently I stumbled onto the actual way they were protecting him.
You do a lot of predictive stumbling too.
I do. I do indeed.
Is it difficult for your brother being a government official? Is that a conflict for you? Sometimes are there some things that you hold back because of your brother's position as governor, that you don't want to put him in an awkward spot? I
feel a little awkward, and I know he does too. Because of his background as a former federal prosecutor and FBI agent, I think, for example, this upcoming trial, and he's certainly involved with the Oklahoma City community, he's on a kind of a tightrope. He knows that what he helped me develop has merit, but he really isn't in a position to come out and say that there are others involved other than what the FBI is willing to admit. Although I think the FBI is going to have problems this fall keeping just 2 guys locked up. I think we're going to find that there are others out there who are associated with these 2.
And do you think it will be even maybe more widespread than just 3 or 4 more, that it will turn out to be a larger conspiracy?
It could be. That's what the FBI fears. That's what they feared in '89 when we went over this. That's what I've continued to hear from them since then. For 2 drifters to carry out that act is possible, but unlikely. They may well have done it, but the question is who might have been behind them. Whatever happened to John Doe number 2? He disappeared from the radar screens of the FBI. The FBI said he was some Army buddy of Nicholson McVeigh, but he's gone. So where is he? Who is he? He was seen by witnesses.
So there's a lot more for us to discover.
We're going to have an interesting trial in Denver on this Oklahoma City bombing.
Martin, we'll talk to you more about the final jihad after this brief break.
This is an RSU TV Encore presentation of Writing Out Loud.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome back to Writing Out Loud. I'm visiting with Martin Keating, who's the author of The Final Jihad. Martin, we were talking a little bit about predictive analysis and the research you did on this book. Obviously you weren't naive about some of the things that were going on, but in your research did you find out some things that even surprised you?
Yes, it surprised me that the government has so many facts that bear on the lives of Americans that it is not choosing to divulge. So if this book does nothing else but alert Americans to the fact that the bad guys know what they're going to do, and many of the good guys know too, but most of the innocents don't have that chance. So I'd like to have the book act as a wake-up call as to what could happen. I name and cite precisely. Of course, it's precise to me now. It may not turn out in real life, but the activities that I've chosen are the ones that the FBI fears most will happen in this country. And I think people should know about them. They may not occur when and where, but they are named in here specifically.
And let's talk about that just a minute. Are these things inevitable, or do we have some leeway here that there's some things we can do to change this?
Well, we have a lot of leeway. If we were to know more, if we were given more advanced warning of threats against America, I think it's possible to avoid a lot of these things. There would be time for, well, first of all, the terrorists might change their target, which would mean we'd disrupt their plans. Secondly, it would take time to reestablish some attack, and it might give the FBI time to infiltrate and make arrests. But as it is today, these terrorist acts come as a total surprise. Now, of course, some of them always will. Terrorism is designed to instill fear, and it works. But when you know that a specific building or a specific railroad line is being targeted, and you don't pass that word on to those who might suffer, then it's a real tragedy. I think that we have the right to know more than we do.
You know, in the book, the way it is structured, it's by times, by dates, and by time periods, and there's almost this sense of something ticking, getting ready to go off. Now, was that just a plot technique, or is that the way you really feel about this? Well,
it's a plot technique, certainly, but I think it's also a way to spread the activities across the country, to build some suspense, if you will, because you have to develop some characters and allow people to identify with them. Because we're talking about real people in the real world who'd be affected by this. But I thought it was a good way to pace the novel, and it takes place over 3 weeks and 3 days. And something like this, as I said, could happen. The FBI's counterterrorism chief feels that within a month we could find the country in turmoil, total turmoil, chaos, martial law, if what I have packaged together were to happen.
Martin, you mentioned that originally you planned to do this as nonfiction, and certainly a lot of what you write in this is nonfiction. Are any of your characters based on real people?
Yes, my hero, Jack Stroud, is based on the life of my Uncle Barney Martin, and I sadly lost him in April. He knew, of course, the book was about him, and it was dedicated to him, and he took me by the arm about 2 weeks before he died, and he held on tightly, and he said, "I'm proud of you." And I said, "Barney, thank you."
It's a great endorsement. It's the best endorsement this book's gotten a lot, but that's the best for you, isn't it?
But Barney was quite a guy, and he developed a number of techniques that the military is using today, and the admirals at the funeral, one admiral told me, and he had a 21-gun salute, and it was a very beautiful affair. But one admiral said Barney Martin did more for naval intelligence, which then got out to all the other military branches, than anybody else since the Second World War. He is the #1 guy for some of the procedures we have today that have allowed us to apprehend and prevent, people doing things to the country and prevent activities. So he was quite a guy.
So even though this is based, though, on fact, do you take some fictional license? For example, in the character of Jack, it's not a one-to-one correspondence with your uncle. No.
I have a love scene and a lust scene. I have to distinguish the two. I can say Barney would probably be proud of my depicting him in the love scene, but the love scene, he would probably hit me over the head.
Well, see, that was one of my grandmother's main worries. People thought my first novel was based on her life,
Yeah.
and there was a lust scene in that, and she was just
Yes.
horrified that
Yes.
people would think that that was connected to her in any way. Because you're revealing some very critical information, government information, I can't help but wonder how the government feels about this. Are you getting any backlash from the government?
I have had some feedback from certain agents, and I have some informants in this country who are also receiving some feedback. There are certain people who aren't happy with this, and I don't want to really name names or positions.
Oh, we wouldn't tell anyone.
I wouldn't tell anyone. But the agents in the field want this story out. They feel it's important. But I found when I went to Washington to meet with the FBI, after I met at the PSYOC Center in November of '89, and those men told their superiors, and we're right at the top echelon of the FBI, we're talking about the number 2 and 3 level. Once they told their superiors what I had said and what they had answered, there was a major cone of silence that formed around the Bureau. And I had to get information then from agents without going through the formal channels.
Have there been any special pressures applied? You mentioned the one chapter about protecting the president. Have there been any other pressures applied to you?
No, not really. Of course, there were pressures applied not to get the book out, and I don't know where those are all being motivated from. There could be some coming from the government. I don't think so. This is a very pro-American book. It's pro-FBI, it's pro-Secret Service, pro-CIA. It's just, my only criticism is that there are certain people at the various highest levels who choose not to pass certain information on to us, and I'm trying to do that through this novel.
What about for you personally? Are you worried that some terrorists might read this and want to retaliate against you? You mentioned the problem just over the title, Jihad, and I would think after some of these terrorists actually read the book that they would be even more angered.
Yes, I'm worried, but, or I should say I'm concerned.
Have there been threats?
Yes, I've had death threats. And I've had threats that weren't necessarily death threats, but phone calls at all hours of the day and night. People saying that they know who I am, where I am. They're watching me. Shortwave broadcasts, internet threats. A lot of this is misguided because a lot of people threatening me don't know what I'm writing and they have no knowledge of the book. But the ones that come from certain parts of the world are a little bit disturbing.
Were you prepared for this? With that kind of response?
No, and the funny thing is, the first time it happened, I was honored. I thought, oh, I'm being noticed. And that's kind of a silly way to, you know, to look at it. But it was like, I've done something that's gotten me some notoriety. Then all of a sudden it sank in that this was serious business. So I have had communication with various law enforcement organizations, and there are times when I do have a bodyguard with me.
And I suppose that will have to be ongoing because you're going to be very high profile with this book. Tell us some of the programs that you're going to be on. Is this Larry King?
we have hard copy and Larry King and a bunch of these major shows. I don't have the media list. I have a publicist now, which is a new world for me, but he has a complete document for me, and we'll be doing the complete book tour around the country. The Don Imus show out of New York. I've done a couple interviews with some New York newspapers, New York Post, and they're the Times is coming up. We have a lot of things happening around America. One of the reporters of the San Francisco Chronicle before this came out said this was the best known unpublished novel in American history. But now it's out, so I hope it becomes the best known.
Were you tempted at all, Martin, when you started getting these threats to pull back from being so public?
A little bit. One of the scenes I have in here is when our hero Jack Stroud is shot through the window of his home, and I got the scene because I sit at my desk with my back to the window, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and there was nobody there. And I always identify myself, and there was no one there, and it happened twice. And I looked over my shoulder, and sitting up the street in a car were two men just sitting, looking at me. And I thought, you know, if they had a cellular telephone and a rifle, and they could have me answer the phone, identify myself, I could have been done in. And so I try to watch things more carefully. I don't think anything serious is going to happen. I honestly hope not, certainly, but I think people are going to have, as I said, fun on one level reading as an escapist novel, on the other hand, finding out some of the things that I think they should know that the our own government knows is possible.
And there's not much chance of this dying down soon because I hear that there are movie deals in the works.
We have 3 major solicitations, if you will, from studios. We'll be pursuing those in the next few weeks. And of course the book is, into July we'll have it distributed nationally. We've already run through our first printing and that's sold out. We're scurrying to get the second printing done. It's a lot of fun. We're talking about TV, made for TV also possible, and series. We have a series underway with one of the people in LA. So I think this book is going to have legs, as they say in the Hollywood world.
And in terms of your writing, this is just beginning as well, isn't it? Because are you planning more books along this same line?
Yes, I originally had planned a second one because, well, I don't want to give it away to the readers, but there's a reason for a second one. But my publisher, who was Burt Ward, who was Robin on the old TV series Batman.
He lives.
He lives, and he still says, holy this and holy that.
And you've seen him without the mask.
Without the mask. He has the same voice, but he's a little heavier. So,
okay.
But he is already talking to one of the major studios about a trilogy. So I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to do the extra book, because I was going to do 2 at a time and have them form a pattern, but I guess we'll do a trilogy.
Well, Martin, congratulations on the success of this. When you get on Larry King Live, tell him hi for us. He's been dying to get on this show, but we've just not been able to work him in. So tell him just as soon as there's an opening, we'll get to him. So thank you, Martin Keating.
Teresa,
thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.